This is Regain Wellness Podcast with Jamie Logie, episode 144, Magnesium, the number one mineral you're probably missing.
I bet we've been together for a million years.
And I bet we'll be together for a million more.
Oh, it's like I started breathing on the night we kissed. And I can't remember what I ever did before. What would we do, baby, without us? What would we do, baby, without us? And there ain't no nothing we can't love each other through. What would we do, baby, without us? Sha-la-la-la.
Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jamie Logie. I run regainedwellness.com, and this is the Regain Wellness Podcast. And introed in, of course, from the theme song to Family Ties, classic 80s sitcom. You'll probably hear more of these on intros now. I thought I'd just throw them in wherever possible. And today's episode is about, like I said in the title, probably the most important mineral there is, magnesium, and one that most people are very deficient on just because they're not, most people just aren't consuming foods that are rich in magnesium, a lot of real whole foods and stuff I'll talk about that you can get it from. And it's amazing. Magnesium is responsible for 300 plus different actions in the body, from everything like, muscle control function to, relaxation and helping with sleep to you blinking. It's just involved in so many different functions in the body. So this show will be hopefully relatively quick, talking about what magnesium really is, things that it helps with, what happens if you don't get enough, and then, the foods and stuff you want to try and find it in. So before we start, if you haven't already, here's the obligatory, please subscribe to this podcast, basically wherever you get a podcast, whether it's delivered by the Podcast Fairy or you find it under a rock somewhere or on iTunes, just subscribe. So wherever you find them, I should be there. And if you're interested in supporting the show, there's a thing called Patreon where you can subscribe for like $1 or $2 a month, and then depending on whatever levels you do, there's different sort of levels of rewards, from ebooks I've done to full-on nutrition coaching and the whole deal. So if you want to see more, it's patreon.com/wellness. If you check it out, cool. If not, cool too. The show will always be free, but it's just one of those things to help improve it. So let's get right to it with magnesium. Okay, so we'll start with actually what magnesium is, hopefully of some interest in, chemistry, biology related things like these minerals. If not, you can skip ahead. But basically, magnesium is the second most abundant element that you find in your cells, and the fourth most abundant positively charged ion in the body. So within the body's cells, this is where it works. This is where it's involved with those 300 plus different functions I mentioned. So in nature, you find it in different forms. It's bonded with other atoms, such as things like magnesium chloride. So you'd find naturally in the sea. Magnesite is that sort of, insoluble rock salt, and sometimes known as magnesium carbonate. And in plants, it's the center element in chlorophyll. It's basically the one readily accessible and the most easily absorbed form of magnesium is going to be magnesium chloride. So if you're looking at supplements or whatever, that's, the ideal form. It basically, because it's soluble in water, and magnesium chlorides, it really absorbs fast, so it increases the rate of absorption. I mentioned this before, but if you're using a supplement and it's in like a pill form, ideally things like powders or capsules full of powder absorb quicker. But if you ever have a say like, a calcium magnesium supplement and it's in a harder pill form, or any supplement. If you want to see kind of the quality of it, drop it into a glass of water, and ideally you'll see it dissolve within the water, and that'll give you an idea of how absorbable it is in your body. Obviously, like your hydrochloric acid and your stomach acids are a lot stronger, but if you've ever, I've tried this from working in various nutrition stores and just sort of testing things out. There's some that are just rock hard bullets that you can drop in the water, and the next day it's completely in the same condition, like it hasn't dissolved at all. So if you have a supplement, a sign of good quality is throwing one in the glass of water and seeing how it works. So that magnesium chlorate's got that quick absorption rate. All organic matter, like plants, animals, our bodies, they're made up of that combination of the elements is, oxygen, a lot of carbon, and hydrogen. So these tiny little building blocks, they all work together and sort of mash up together to create the compounds that make up things like your body tissue, body fluids, little microscopic elements that regulate body functions. They're all sort of working in harmony here. So you've got oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen form the basis of compounds basically found in all living things. So beyond compounds built from these four most common elements, the oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, the rest of your body's contents is made up of minerals. So these are the building blocks. It starts with those four things and it goes to minerals. And magnesium is a macro mineral, meaning it's a bigger one, which, unlike trace minerals, obviously smaller, is needed by the body in large amounts. So, when you think of macro, think of big, micro is small, unless you want to macrame a pair of jean shorts, which is a whole other thing. So some of those other big macro minerals are the things calcium, sodium, potassium. That's, along with magnesium, make up some of those big macro minerals. So the average body contains about 25 grams of magnesium, which is quite a lot. And it's one of the six, they're what they consider the essential minerals, and they must be supplied in the diet. Our bodies just don't make them. We have to get them, like essential amino acids, essential fatty acids. Our bodies can make some of those, which they call the non-essential ones, but essential meaning you have to get them from your diet. So once magnesium enters your body through food, through like those supplements, there's even, you can get magnesium in the form of like creams and sort of topical applications, and it absorbs through the skin. Remember, anything you put on your skin, you're essentially eating, because it can absorb and go into the bloodstream. So it's really why you want to avoid, chemical lotions and, things like chemical sunblocks and whatever, because if it's on your skin, it's in you. So same form, like with these, magnesium creams, you put on your skin and it goes. So once the magnesium's entered in whatever form, it's broken down and released to form independent little magnesium atoms, or they call them ions here. So in this ionic form, magnesium has that, if you remember back to high school chemistry and everything, it has that positive charge. And the magnesium then functions as part of the structure of the body through the presence in your bone. But arguably more important is the function as the cell regulators in all those different chemical reactions as mentioning. So obviously a massive part of the bone, and if your bones aren't in good shape, you're not in good shape. But then as far as a function standpoint, it's involved in all that. So you see how important this is already. And magnesium powers all your enzymes. And there's, like I said, 300 enzyme-driven biomechanical reactions that are happening in your body constantly, basically. They're happening right now. And they work in the form, when you have nutrients, all nutrients used by the human body function as either sources of energy, building blocks for physical body structures, or elements needed to regulate and control the body's many functions. So that's, with like other vitamins, magnesium's role is to be regulatory. It allows enzymes to function properly, which then in turn enable all that large majority of the body's chemical reactions. So enzymes are so important because they're the basis of the body's ability to function while supporting life. And many of the necessary chemical reactions that the body carries out, whether it's, breaking down sugars in your digestive system or, anything like that, can only normally be, performed under extreme heat or the right acidity. But with enzymes, they allow these reactions to occur without damaging the body's fragile tissues and organs. And they still don't, like, these enzymes don't function alone. So, like, substances known as they call them enzyme cofactors, they must regulate the functions of enzymes in order to control the rate of reactions within the body. So these cofactors, they're basically keys that switch within each enzyme and instruct it to start or stop certain activities. So I'm hoping you're picturing back to high school science and chemistry, whatever, and that idea of keys, and even the idea with genes that, things open and close and turn on and off. And that's the idea with these cofactors. So, and magnesium, again, because we're talking about these cofactors, magnesium is one of the most common cofactors in the body. So that presence of magnesium, it has to be there for things like glucose and fat breakdown, the production of proteins, enzymes, antioxidants. It actually creates DNA and RNA, and it regulates cholesterol production. Obviously, like, crucial life things. And without things like magnesium, or the enzyme cofactors they call it, including, both hormones and the vital minerals such as magnesium itself, reactions could basically spiral out of control. There'd be nothing to keep them in place and function in this right order. And the thing is, even a tiny imbalance can chronically impact your body's level of performance and health. And that's why, magnesium not being the only factor, but one of the biggest ones, because people just aren't getting it from their diet, and can be related to why there are a lot of, metabolic diseases, inflammatory diseases, chronic fatigues. It can be chalked up to things like this. So magnesium's function as that, that enzyme cofactor is seen to be, like, crucially important in the role that your body's hormones play. So the big crucial difference, though, is that, our body can manufacture most hormones by itself using the basic, the building blocks that already make it up, but magnesium just cannot be manufactured by the body, and it has to be taken in. So it's so weird that, a lot of these processes in our body can happen from the natural building blocks, but the functions that they have to carry out after don't happen without this thing that we get from our diet, which is pretty incredible to think how we've actually survived as a species, completely dependent on the foods and stuff that are in our immediate environment that are going to help all these enzymatic reactions happen. So it's fascinating that it's an essential thing that works hand in hand with our own body. So in the same way that, multiple bodily systems suffer in cases of, say, like, thyroid malfunction or insulin resistance, magnesium, the deficiency of it has, like, super far-reaching implications for your overall body's function. And, like, your thyroid control, like I said, thyroid controls a lot. Your pancreas involved with, if it's putting out way too much insulin, that's, you need more and more each time, and that's what insulin resistance is. And it basically can lead to that burnout of the pancreas, and then you're looking at, type 2 diabetes, and then all the problems that will come with that. So it's incredible. It's safe to say magnesium is probably the number one important mineral. Everything is important, but you can see how it is just the cornerstone of a lot of these functions and our overall health. So magnesium as well is, it drives our fuel source. It's a required ingredient of that energy production process that occurs inside those little tiny structures in the cells. So you have a molecule, if you know about anything with fitness and strength, you've heard of ATP before, adenosine triphosphate. and that's used in it's basically a unit of energy used in your cells. And many of the functions carried out by the cells require ATP to provide the energy for the action. So on this like cellular level, but then as far as like if you're a sprinter or weightlifter or do high explosive base exercise, whatever, ATP is involved with all that. And so, but in the cells, ATP and the role of magnesium is, involved in the muscle fiber contraction, protein synthesis, building back more muscle, cell reproduction. It transports different substances across the cell barrier. And it's, think of ATP as that fuel for the cell's activities. It's like gas, basically. It's gas, how gas fuels a car. And if you think to the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and they produce the ATP by just converting, simple sugars like glucose or fatty acids or amino acids. And that's how it's making that fuel. But without the presence of magnesium, the nutrients we take in could not be metabolized into usable units of energy. And so for athletes or people who are fit, if you're not getting sufficient magnesium, your performance suffers because of this reason. Your cells just aren't able to build that energy from the ATP because you're deficient in magnesium. So it's one of the biggest things athletes are very tend to be depleted in naturally just for the performance aspect. When you think of, electrolyte loss from sweating, and that's the idea behind things obviously like Gatorade is to replenish those electrolyte levels to keep you performing, longer and more efficient. And this isn't just for high-end athletes, but if you're involved in, general fitness or CrossFit, or you do swimming or squash or even like yoga, you need that energy for your body to function. And it's, if your diet isn't rich with magnesium, then performance and, energy-based activities suffer from it, whether you're LeBron James or, just some schmuck playing pickup basketball at the YMCA every week. So I could keep going on about the science of it. Like I find fascinating. I understand if you don't. But just that's a rough look at the key importance on that like that super tiny cellular level. And how from that level it affects all these big functions in our body. So there are signs and symptoms you can look for to know if you, or ideally can be pretty sure that you have a magnesium deficiency. They call it hypomagnesemia. And like I said, it's one of the big overlooked health problems. And it's, it basically, as of the last research, 75% of people are just not meeting their recommended intake, because a lot of people just aren't eating as many fresh foods and whole foods where you find these things. And the symptoms don't they don't necessarily become revealed until the magnesium levels get very low. And so things you can look for are muscle twitches and cramps. So if you get those, little twitches, tremors, muscle cramps, it can be a sign of magnesium deficiency. And, in worst case scenarios, the super deficiency can end up in, convulsions and even seizures. So it's believed that these symptoms are caused by a greater flow of calcium into the cells we were talking about, which throws the balance off and sort of overexcites and really stimulates the muscle cells. So supplements, they may relieve muscle twitches and cramps in deficient people, and they're not necessarily the best way to treat it, as opposed to getting at constant natural magnesium intake through food. So it's not always the case. Like any involuntary muscle twitches don't immediately mean magnesium deficiency. This can happen from, things like too much caffeine or stress or whatever, even sometimes like the result with certain medications. I don't know. But if you get these little twitches often and you're not eating a real whole foods diet, it might be related to that. So there's some issues with sometimes cognitive problems, sometimes even feeling like lack of emotion, and sometimes things like even depression and maybe a bit of anxiety, stuff like that can be related to low magnesium levels. And there's been a few reviews and studies that they say that magnesium supplements might benefit a certain amount of people who have different potential anxiety disorders and stuff like that. It's still, relatively new research. A lot of stuff I've been looking at here comes from info through Healthline and Authority Nutrition, which do a lot of research-based nutrition reporting and insights. So, a lot of early looks at things like this, but still, not written in stone, just for the record. So, other things that can show, obviously, magnesium deficiency, big one being osteoporosis, which, is weak bones, increased risk of bone fracture. And it's influenced by a lot of different things, like old age, lack of exercise. One of the big benefits behind strength training is that we obviously think muscle building and strength, but strength training is a bone strengthener too. And that's one of the biggest reasons for it. And it's one of the reasons that senior citizens who are more at risk for the bone fractures and stuff like that should be doing various forms of strength training to improve that bone strength. But then, you got poor intake of other vitamins and vitamin D and whatever. But magnesium deficiency is a big risk for osteoporosis. And, the deficiency might itself, I mentioned before how a big storage and usage of it is in the bone, besides like all the enzyme functions it does in the body. So the deficiency might actually directly weaken the bone. And then it also lowers the blood levels of calcium, which mean the main building blocks. And there's been studies in rats, obviously not, the direct comparison to people, depending on who you're talking about, though. But these studies confirm that dietary magnesium depletion results in reduced bone mass. And they haven't done these on people, but just the fact that in any form of mammal, their bone mass goes down due to a lack of magnesium. So interesting to think about. Then you've got things like signs to look out for, like fatigue, muscle weaknesses. Again, not, these can be related to other things, but, are often a sign of magnesium deficiency. So obviously you're going to be fatigued from time to time. More often than not, that means just you need more rest, but severe fatigue, like persistent fatigue, might be a sign of an actual health problem. So it's a tough one since it's not like a non-specific symptom. It's kind of impossible to identify, but it's been connected with that, along with the muscle weakness. So probably more of a specific sign of magnesium deficiency is that condition, muscle weakness, and they call it myasthenia. I think that's how it's said. And scientists believe the weakness is caused by the loss of potassium in the muscle cells. And again, that happens because you don't have enough magnesium. Everything's thrown out of whack. So magnesium can be behind this fatigue and the muscle weakness. Then high blood pressure also. And this goes again to animal studies, but it shows that magnesium deficiency may increase blood pressure and even promote high blood pressure. And obviously that's a big, risk factor for heart disease and things like that. So again, direct evidence lacking in humans, but just interesting that in any form of mammal, you remove magnesium and things start to go haywire. And there's different reviews over magnesium supplements that have seen to possibly lower blood pressure in adults who already have high blood pressure. So, it's going to be something you want in the mix anyway. Like you're wanting, even if it's not directly related due to all these other important factors that magnesium's involved in, if it's even a tiny bit related to lowering the risk of heart disease, it's obviously extremely, extremely important. Asthma, this is a weird one. And it's in patients with severe asthma, magnesium deficiency is often seen. And then the other side, magnesium levels tend to be lower in individuals with asthma than in healthy people. So how this is related, it's kind of unclear, but the researchers believe that this lack of magnesium can cause the buildup now because it's out of balance. So there's too much calcium. So the buildup of calcium in the muscles lining the airways of the lungs is what's causing the asthma. And this buildup of the calcium is causing the airways to constrict. That's just one of the functions of calcium working, and then obviously makes breathing more difficult. And interestingly, inhalers with magnesium sulfate are sometimes given to people with severe asthma, and it can help relax them and actually expand and open up the airways. That balance is a little more restored, so calcium isn't dominating. And so, yeah, just interesting that they, kind of pump up these inhalers with that magnesium sulfate. Again, relatively new insight. It's not saying that it's going to completely cure it, but it's, they're looking pretty confidently that the severe asthma is possibly related to the magnesium deficiency, but obviously, still research and info is needed. And one of the last ones is irregular heartbeat. And obviously, again, anytime this is an issue, it's something to check with the doctor and just see what's happening. But it's thought the most serious symptoms of magnesium deficiency becomes things like heart arrhythmias or irregular heartbeat. And the symptoms, though, are mild in most cases. Often there's not even symptoms. However, in some people, it might cause heart palpitations, which, are those pauses in between heartbeats. And then with any arrhythmias, you might have lightheadedness, shortness of breath, chest pain, even fainting. You might have increased risk of stroke, stuff like that. And this is thought, again, the imbalance issue. And in this case, it's thought that the imbalance of potassium levels inside and outside of the heart muscle may be to blame. And that's, again, a condition associated with magnesium deficiency. Anytime when these things get out of whack, all hell tends to break loose. So some patients that's been looked at here with congestive heart failure and the arrhythmia have been shown to have lower magnesium levels than healthy people. And again, when they're treated with magnesium injections, it significantly improves their heart function. So, again, it's stuff, if these are any things that pertain to you, it's, we can't say it's immediately connected to the magnesium issues, but these sometimes can reveal magnesium deficiency. So obviously, if any of these conditions are happening, like the asthma thing or the irregular heartbeat, obviously go have it checked out. So how much magnesium do you need a day? So there's no one fit answer here, and it's going to depend on basically your age and your sex. And these are kind of the average daily recommended amounts. So when you're starting as a little, from basically babies to, birth to 6 months, around 30 milligrams. With kids, it's, gets a little higher. When you're 1 to 3, it can be 80 milligrams. When you get 4 to 8 years old, 130. 9 to 13, around 240. Then when you start to hit puberty, the magnesium demands go a lot higher. So if you're a boy, around 14 to 18, you're looking at 410 milligrams, which I guarantee most kids are not even getting close to. Teen girls, 14 to 18 years old, 360 milligrams. And then just anyone over, 18, if you're a man, it's around 400 to 420 milligrams. Women, around 300 to 320. And then there's different conditions or situations after that. But this is, like I said, is a lot more than what most people are taking in. So I'll talk about the certain foods you can find it in just a second. But if you're taking a supplement or a multivitamin, you want to make sure that it's around that amount. Like, you still don't want to go crazy with it, but you can see how much you do actually need. And then if you're like magnesium that's naturally present in food, is not going to be harmful, and it doesn't need to be limited. So if you're healthy, your kidneys will basically just get rid of any excess in the urine. But if you're doing it in a supplement, you shouldn't go above those limits. Like I said, like the 300 milligrams or for women, or the 400-ish for men. So ideally, if you're eating a lot of the good foods, like you're getting a good intake of it anyway. And then, maybe if you had a supplement that, or a multivitamin, it has like a little bit, but like have a look if you're already taking these things, and with those limits in mind, just make sure your supplement isn't going too much past that. Okay, best food sources of magnesium. Actually, one of the highest is whole wheat itself. I'm not a fan of grains, especially wheat in general. But if you are having wheat, get whole wheat. If you use it like for baking, don't, avoid white flour whenever you can. And the more natural, the better. If you can get a real sort of stone ground bread from whole wheat, not as bad, but it has a lot of magnesium in it. The next best choice is going to be spinach. So basically dark leafy greens. If you see anything dark and green, it's going to have magnesium in it. And spinach is probably the highest of those. It's got around 157 milligrams in 1 cup. And if you cook it, it makes it a little bit better too. And it's a little easier on your digestion. A lot of raw, depending on who you are, a lot of raw foods can be tough on digestion, like broccolis and spinach. Not always, but if you have any digestive issues, sometimes they're a little bit tougher. But spinach is one of the kings of magnesium. From there, you've got quinoa, which I think is probably one of the best carb sources out there. It's technically a seed. It's not a grain. It's like rice, and it's one of the only full you can call it a vegetable, like a vegetarian food that has a complete amino acid profile. You get all the different amino acids making complete proteins, which doesn't exist a lot in vegetable-based foods, but it's a awesome protein source, awesome minerals, and a ton of magnesium in it. So go with quinoa. And quinoa is getting a little cheaper now too. If you go I get it from bulk food stores, and it's getting almost as cheap as rice, when it used to be more of a sort of fringe ingredient, and I don't know, something for hippies or hipsters or whatever. But now it's a little more accessible. The next best thing, so talking about if you see anything dark and green, it's going to be good for magnesium. The next thing, any nuts and seeds you see, that's one of your next best easy magnesium sources. So almonds, though, being sort of the king of magnesium. Perfect snack, lots of protein, good omega-3s, fiber, the whole deal. And even just 1 ounce of almonds has 80 milligrams of magnesium, and that's a relatively small serving. If you have digestion issues, almonds can be a little tough to break down. You might benefit from soaking them overnight, and it can actually activate the enzymes in the almonds, so it makes them even a bit more nutritious and a little easier to break down. The next nut is going to be cashews, and we're talking about getting these in the raw state, so not salted, not roasted, the whole deal, just as raw as you can get them. And another great source of magnesium is around 74 milligrams in 1 ounce. Next best thing are going to be beans, and specifically black beans. And beans are a really good nutrition source. And again, if you're vegetarian or vegan, another good protein source. But again, filled with magnesium. So, other beans like navy beans, lentils, whatever, but black beans are a little higher there. Next one, you've got a great magnesium food source is edamame. And in case you don't know, edamame are soybeans that are still in the pods. You can, they're easy to make. You can steam them, you can boil them, you can just like toss them in with a bit of olive oil, sea salt, whatever. But what do we got here? Around 50 milligrams for a half cup, and that's shelled of the edamame beans. Then we've got, again, another nut, peanuts. If you can get raw, natural, I'd probably suggest avoiding, brands like Skippy or Jif peanut butter or whatever, which are basically like icing sugar disguised as peanut butter. It's like peanut flavored icing sugar with those things, with a lot of crappy vegetable oils in them too, and a lot of cases, a lot of hydrogenated oils. But if you can get raw nut butters like peanut butter, cashew butter, almond butter, awesome. And in the case of peanuts, just 2 tablespoons has around 50 milligrams of magnesium. So get just straight up plain, and it's good stuff. Okay, last couple things. Tofu. So again, if you're a vegan, vegetarian, that's one of the meat substitutes. Good source of magnesium. And then another said like nuts and seeds are going to be obviously a guaranteed go-to magnesium source, but the top seed are going to be sesame seeds. And easy to, a good snack. You can throw them into like stir fries or salads. It's easy to use, gives more texture and crunch to stuff. And even like 1 tablespoon has around 32 milligrams. So there's a bunch of good magnesium sources right there. And I'll probably wrap it up now. Hopefully you got some good info. I know this is a little more science heavy, but if you like these type of things, let me know. Or if you want me to back it off a little, or a combination of both, or even just other topics potentially you want to see covered, if you write to info@regainedwellness.com, I'll check your electronic mails, and yeah, just let me know. But sometimes it's good to have a little more. It's hard to talk about magnesium without getting more into the science of it. But there's some good takeaways as far as what to look for with potential issues of not getting enough, and then where you can find it. So that's going to be it for me. Probably didn't think I could talk 36 minutes about magnesium, but I did it. So there we go. And again, thanks for listening. If you do like the show, subscribe. If you really like it, give it a rating and review on iTunes, and then more people get to see it, and then they give me a gold star, and everybody's happy. So I'll cut it off here and talk to you soon. Bye.